Hey guys, welcome to Nick Davies Hypnotherapy, Psychotherapy, NLP Life Coaching. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by my good friend Kenny Mammarella de Cruz. So I
Yay!
first met Kenny, I think it was probably back in 2019, and you were the first person to interview me on Men's Radio. So
Mhm.
would you do me a favour and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are, and just some background really, if you don't mind.
I could put this in a nutshell that brings COVID into it as well, because a few days before we went into lockdown, I went into isolation because someone that I work with got the symptoms and said might be an idea that you isolate. So I isolated, and as I isolated, I noticed that I kept checking out of the window to see if the military were there, expecting to see them. And I kept expecting to hear gunfire. And I realized that I'm not in London. Inside, I'm in Africa when we were in hiding because the Secret Service were after my family. Our car was followed, our phones were tapped, there was curfew. People weren't allowed to be stopping and speaking in the street because that would be conspiracy against the government. And I was back there, and we lived near Idi Amin. There was gunfire everywhere.
Can you just
So
tell the audience, why you were in Africa, what led you to that kind of war-torn situation?
yeah, well, I was born in Uganda, and my mother was born in Uganda. My father was born in Kenya. Originally, my family's from Goa, so we were in like a very old-fashioned Portuguese kind of Catholic bubble in Uganda, and that was
Wow.
our life, and it was an absolutely wonderful life. My father was on the death list because he was head of the parcel department at that stage in the Uganda post office, and he was getting people out of smuggling papers. Like there was a book he took out. There were a lot of people being beaten to a pulp, and he put a stop to that by the soldiers and by people. He went into a place where when you go in there, you just basically don't come out. And he went in saying this is post office issues, not government issues. And he got people out alive, risking his life. So obviously our name just went high and higher up the death list. But that was home, and things kicked
Wow.
off. Things kicked off. We thought we would be there all our lives. That was our life. But then we isolated from our friends because there's a big Catholic community. Because connection with us could be contamination. Other people would get into trouble. So with all of that, I was back, and then a few days later, the country went into lockdown, and I thought, well, if I got triggered, I wonder who else is going to be triggered.
Yeah.
So from there, I put on daily men's groups, and they're still going. Then it was weekdays, 12:30 to 1:30 by donation. Now it's every day, including Sundays. Sundays is
Wow.
10:30 to 11:30. And the most important thing that happens, that's only an hour. I've been holding groups for 20 years. We have open
Mm.
groups, closed groups. Now we've got young men's groups, mature men's groups, women's groups, corporate groups. I train people to hold groups. Cardboard cutout of my Amazon #1 best-selling ebook to
Wow.
train people so people can hold their own groups. And I
Yeah.
do a day training. We've got an accredited training coming out. But the object of the exercise is speak out what's going on. If it's fear, if it's ill health, if it's, I can't stand my partner, or I miss my life, or I'm
Mm.
isolated, or very often it's um, I'm flashing back to boarding school,
Yeah.
or I feel traumatized because now I remember that when I was a child, if I behaved badly, I'd be locked in the laundry room and I wouldn't be let out, and it was
Yeah.
torture. The things that have come up for people.
Mm.
And I wanted to avoid men lashing out on people in their lives or
Yeah.
lashing in on themselves with depression. There have been a lot of suicidal thoughts and feelings that people speak out, or even drink drugs or bad behavior.
Mm.
Including, weirdly, over lockdown, I've had half a dozen male clients whose partners have been cheating on them. They've had affairs during lockdown, and 4 of them have young children. Now, this needs to be spoken out so people can hear
Yeah.
from each other, not be fixed or saved or make a drama of things, but just so people can learn from each other's experiences. And that's it. So for me, it's who are you now? And what are your options? Rather than I'll go in my head and try and fix it and feel bad and try and work it out. I think I'd rather people could learn from everyone else and not fall down the same hole and not tell each other, oi, there's a hole down there. Do you know what I mean?
One of the best things, Kenny, is that you and I have had conversations about this and mental health and our own issues and things like that. Is as a man, sometimes you feel that you're the only one
Yeah,
suffering, and
yeah.
it's so nice when you speak to somebody who, like I always say to people, I appear together and everything else, and I'm doing quite well, but I'm still a broken individual like we all are. I still have idiosyncrasies and things that I'm still working on, and it's nice when you speak to somebody else and you think, wow, God, they struggle too,
I
and for
think
me that was a really refreshing thing about your groups and what you do.
I think you've hit on probably the biggest thing is when a man realizes that he's not alone,
Mm,
then it's like, sadly, most people or so many people come in with what's wrong with me and how do I do
yeah,
me right? And they
yeah,
find out there's nothing wrong with them. And it's not doing them right. It's who are you? It's being. Who
yeah,
am I inside that needs to come into the world? And
mm,
rather than fixing things, it's tools to respond to life and grow into life, including
yeah,
communication, boundaries, even permission. But the permission comes from self,
yeah,
maybe after listening to other people. But there's nothing wrong that needs fixing. The
yeah,
world, the one thing every man and woman can do better than every other man and woman is to be themselves. So why try to be Johnny Depp or
yeah.
I'm choosing the wrong people. I was going to say Johnny Depp and who's Sean Connery, but I was
Yeah,
recently interviewed by the guy who put International Men's Day on the map, and and it was the day that I think Johnny Depp was convicted and Sean Connery died. If I remember, it was the same day or 2 days apart or
yeah,
something. And he said, what do you have to say to that? Is that toxic masculinity? And it's, well, actually, toxic masculinity and toxic femininity have got nothing to do with male people and female people.
exactly.
It's about behavior.
Yeah,
And this
and
behavior needs to be known, named, and unlearned.
yeah, and I think that's the danger, in the work I do in the psychotherapy side and things. Is what I say to people is, it's dangerous to say I don't like that person or I don't like that group of people. Because really, what we do, and this is what the brain does, is we generalize. So when we see a behavior in a certain group of people, we generalize that we don't like those people, but actually,
Mm.
we will like some of those people. We just don't like that behavior. So I find it's,
Exactly.
rather than saying it's toxic masculinity, it doesn't need that label masculinity. It
Mm.
needs to be called toxic behavior or aggressive behavior. And
Mm.
that can exist in anybody, race, creed, color, whatever else, sex, orientation, and all that kind of stuff. So I find it most helpful to say to people, dislike the behavior, not the person. And then if you've
And
got behaviors yourself you need fixing, work on those.
absolutely. And I would say the strongest, most powerful men I have noticed can so easily crumble if they are withdrawn from or criticized.
Yeah.
And some people would call that femininity, toxic feminine behavior. Some
Mm.
people might call it efficient parenting or
Yeah.
efficient control
Yeah.
because, little boys are apparently made of slugs and snails and puppy dogs.
Exactly.
I mean, that's not
Puppy
very
dog's
nice, is
tail.
it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And
But, little boys have energy and testosterone. And
yeah.
a lot of parents, a lot of people don't know how to hold that energy and harness that energy. So they'll
Yeah.
shame it and withdraw to control it. Meanwhile, where
Yeah.
does this energy go? Is that a bad person or is that an alive person that needs to be met? I think it's
Yeah.
very normal, but it's just shocking how people's behavior, exactly as you said, can define this person as a good or bad person. Meanwhile, it's like, no, need to listen, need to
The other
connect,
thing,
need to
the other
know.
thing to remember as well is there's a body of research that shows that when obviously a mother is in the, I think it's I can't remember which trimester now, whether it's the first trimester or the third, but if they're under a lot of stress or have a lot of stress around them and anxiety and stressful situations where they're not sure, particularly around safety and security in terms of having a home and being safe and things like that, that they have a flush of the chemicals that they have during the pregnancy. If they give birth to a girl, it's more likely to be a tomboy. So that young
Oh,
lady
really?
will, yeah, so that young lady will experience kind of young male tendencies to be quite aggressive and do things like that. And I've met certain clients of mine, and we've gone back and said, what happened during your mum's pregnancy and this, that, and the other. We found those things. So, so it's no fault
Wow.
of their own that they experience that behaviour. And as you and I
Yeah.
know, having experienced traumas in our lives, it does colour your life. We can fix those things and make them better, but it does
Mm,
shape your life in terms of how you behave or react to certain things.
mm, mm. What I love about what you do is rather than talking about it forever, it's like, okay, now we know what it is. What we need is a bit of rewiring. Shall we go there? Done,
Exactly.
done.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And then I guess one of the things that the men's groups does is it's practicing being who you are and
Yeah.
practicing noticing who you no longer need to be,
Yeah.
and then experimenting with who you might be. And there's
Yeah.
space there where it's not competitive or hierarchical or high
Yeah.
powered or judgmental. It's just open, and there's feedback, and there's a
Mm.
space to just like to find out rather
Well, one
than
of the
just
things I
put on
love about
another
your
show.
work, Kenny, is that the clients I struggle with mostly are the clients that aren't ready for the therapy that I do. Like you
Mm,
say, we go in, we fix it. But sometimes they're just not ready. They've never communicated with anybody. And it can, and for me, the beauty is, I would say for people, if you're not ready for therapy, go to Kenny's groups, get yourself sorted first, because Kenny will get you in. You're kind of like the person who prepares the person for the operation. You do the
yeah.
anesthesia, you go through this is what's going to happen. This is when you're booked in, all the important stuff, and you get them ready and you make them feel great. And then the next step is if they want to take that further, they can, go in and
Mm,
fix things. But I see so many people that lack that ability to communicate. And what your groups do, I think, really, really well is give men space to be themselves. And I've seen the results myself. You've passed me, several clients, and I'm very grateful for. But they come in such a great space that they're so easy to work with because you've
mm,
got them, primed and prepped, and they come in and say, right, I want this, 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 and this. And I'm like, hey, happy days. It's not ordering from a menu. So it's so important, and that's why I wanted
mm.
to give people access to you so that I can, really kind of sing the song of your work that you do in terms of getting it out there more, because that's something that I don't do. So how can people find out about you? How can they join your men's groups?
Mensgroups.co.uk. Let me have a look here. And then there's a tab that says ebook. It's not just the ebook, but further down, if you scroll, there is a video of a recorded group. So you can see a cross
Ah,
section. I think the youngest person there might be early 20s, the oldest might be 70s. So there's a
wow,
cross section of men. There's a
yeah,
cross section of race, class, age, sexual orientation, stories, everything. But also, they're busy enough now that we've started Young Men Speak, and I think that's for people under
wow,
30 or 35. We've got Mature Men Speak for people over 50. And the other day I did a chat, a YouTube thing with someone that runs the young men's, the older men's, and we've got Women Speak. And interestingly, we talked about the similarities and differences. And it was the woman who's a therapist, actually, but who's also trained with me to hold groups, who said, do you know, and I'm so looking forward to talking about sex, because I do like to talk about sex and we never get much of a chance. And then today in our check-in, we don't often talk about sex unless someone brings it up and there's an issue,
yeah,
because there's other stuff going on. But it's not all about competition or
Yeah.
sex or bitching about anyone or anything. It's not these things, and it's not hierarchical. It's whatever's up for people. Let's just sit with it. Let's follow the feeling back to see what's being triggered. Let's see what our fears and fantasies are and what needs living beyond, and get present and connected here and now, and see where it wants to go. But, you know, talk about everything really. But interesting that the women brought it up. And then it's like it happened today because this is, you know, it was up for someone, so to speak.
And that's what I love about what you do is, you know, I think, and that's why I've never, you know, I was saying to you earlier, I've never attempted to do men's group myself because I understand where my skills lie and where other people's skills lie. But, you know, I remember that, you know, with the first time that we were on the radio when you were interviewing me, is you're so good at holding space for people, making them feel supported, and pulling out all of the interesting things about people that maybe what Carl Gustav Jung would call the shadows. You know, shining a gentle torch on those things, but bringing them out in a way where you know you feel supported, and that's what I
where
really
the
enjoyed
gold
about it.
is. I'm curious, and luckily the things that I want to know, it seems that other people want to know. But I remember when we met, and I just thought, what a relief that there's a solid, grounded, real bloke, rather than someone who just wants to be special and wants to be famous and wants to be whatever. The wannabes bore me. But and there's a space for people who everyone really is to show up. And you know, you talk about the shadow. I think there's always gold in the shadow. And what we mentioned today is the way a lot of issues are put into the shadow and sexualized. And then people think it's about that rather than the time they went there, because it's this is the bit that needs to be set free. That's just the splitting, so they can be a half decent life and a good public face showing. We're each other's fan club, aren't we?
Oh, I think we are, Kenny. That's why today had to happen. Kenny, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for your time. What I'm going to do is I'll put your website in the notes in the video and everything else so people can find you. But honestly, thank you so much for your time, Kenny.
Absolute
and I'll speak
pleasure.
to you again soon.
Cool. See you soon.
Cheers, buddy.